All right, welcome back, everybody. My name is Jack Paisley, and this is the Sports Casual, and we had some big time NFL games that we're going to talk about today. So let's jump right in. First, we had the Eagles versus the Rams on the NFC side. Eagles end up getting a 28-22 win, and I mean, visually, you can't beat that kind of game with the snow. I one personal thought I have for all NFL teams that I think should be standard, other than I think they should all be playing on grass, and then I think all of them should have domes. Personally, I just don't think it's fair. I want to see the best players in the world come out with the perfect conditions every time. I don't think it's fair to a team like the Rams that are from California. Like, you physically can't train in that snowy, cold environment like the Philadelphia Eagles. So I understand there's the whole, home field advantage thing. But I personally think that there should always be a dome included for all these stadiums. So I think it's actually ridiculous that, like, the Bills, who we're going to talk about in a second, is building that multi-million-dollar facility or billion-dollar facility, and it's going to be open air. That I just don't think it's fair. But on the flip side of that, when you see a game like that Eagles versus the Rams game, when it's that snowy, there's just something cool about it. Like, seeing the snow when you see Saquon bust that 78 yarder, like, there is just something cool about seeing that. There's no other way of saying it. Like, it is visually appealing for the user, even though I'm sure it sucks dick to play there and to be in especially to be in the fan or the crowd. Like, I'm sure those guys are just absolutely hammered the whole time. Um, I'm always 50-50 on that. But from a TV viewing standpoint, it's just great. And obviously, like, it was a great game. So take my opinion with a grain of salt on that. But that's just one bias I have, is I think every NFL stadium should be a dome, especially if it's in a cold environment, which is about half the teams in the league. But for the game itself, the story of the game is Saquon Barkley is really good at football, and the Giants are dumb. Like, w- I'm amazed that after this season, the Giants GM has retained his job, because he looks like a complete just idiot letting Saquon Barkley go, especially to one of the big rivals in the Eagles, because that man could theoretically, like, I think there's a decent chance that man gets them to a Super Bowl almost single handedly. Like, we'll get into my picks a little bit later, but it's gonna be tough to bet against that guy. Like, the only guy that I thought could kind of rival him as a running back is Derrick Henry, which he's going home. So, like, the Eagles are gonna represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. So, spoiler alert, we'll talk about it a little bit more in a sec. But in this game, it was just the story of the Rams couldn't really stop Saquon Barkley. Like, he had, I think, 200 yards and two touchdowns. Like, when your running back's doing that in a cold, miserable game, like, that's just a recipe for winning, especially when the quarterback in Jalen Hurts runs really well. Which I thought he ran pretty well today. Obviously, he kind of struggled in the passing game. Um, so I think the Eagles are going to have an interesting decision unless they win the Super Bowl in the offseason with Jalen Hurts. I think that they're going to have to start looking as possible heir apparents, just because that passing offense is just, it's struggling right now. And I don't know if it's maybe because of the concussion, or if it's the offensive game planning that they're doing. But whatever they're doing, they're a run first team. They are a Saquon Barkley run pass option play. Um, and then for the Rams, like, I just didn't think they looked quite as good last week. Like, they really came out firing last week for LA. Like, with all the fires and stuff, they were playing like a team possessed. And I thought they played pretty good today. I thought Matthew Stafford was clearly the better, like, quarterback of the two. I've said multiple times, I think Matt Stafford is a first ballot Hall of Famer, and I stand by that opinion. I actually really like the Rams coming into this. I kind of got a little iffy once I saw the weather report, especially because the Rams are such a pass centric team that I did get a little worried at that. But I mean, they were in it. Like, it was a close game, but I mean, it was just a time of possession, like, slug nose game that the Eagles ended up pulling out. So sad to see the Rams go. I mean, they were kind of one of those teams that everybody's writing off. I remember halfway through the season, they were all talking about trading for Cooper Cup and basically unloading all of these assets and then just fully rebuilding this team from scratch. I think Matt Stafford was talked about going to like Cleveland, which everybody gets talked about going to Cleveland, so that doesn't mean much. But uh, like they should be really proud of themselves because like no one was really counting them in as a legitimate playoff contender or even a playoff team for this year. So it just shows I think how good not only Matt Stafford is but also Sean McVay because they kind of willed this team into the playoffs and they had a little run, but just ran into a buzzsaw in terms of a really talented roster in the Philadelphia Eagles because I think they are objectively just the most talented team in the NFL. Whether they'll be able to finish or not, we'll see. Uh, but I mean, they don't have a ton of issues in their team construct. I mean, you could argue the Jalen Hurts one just because you kind of need a thrower of the football at quarterback, and he's more of a runner at this point in his career. But their kicker is bad. Like I don't know what happened with the NFL and kickers because I remember when they were like we're making too many kicks. We've got to tighten the goalposts because we're making too many kicks. And now you got guys like you have a Hall of Famer in Justin Tucker that throughout this whole season hasn't been able to make a kick. Like he was missing extra points. Like it's we're at a kicker epidemic in the NFL's history. Like it wouldn't shock me if in the second or third round we start seeing kickers going. If you have this like stud collegiate kicker, just because it's becoming a luxury position that most of the team are just struggling with. Like unless you're Pittsburgh with Boswell, the Broncos and the have been pretty good this year, and then the Cowboys are probably the top three kicking team. You can maybe argue the Chargers in there as well, but outside of that, a lot of these teams have just been kind of crossing their fingers with their kicker because for some reason no one's kicking very well this year. I don't really get it, but we'll see if the NFL addresses that. But then jumping into the Bills versus the Ravens, this was kind of the marquee game of the season until next week, which will be the Chiefs and the Bills. But this was out in Buffalo, and this is another cold, just miserable looking game. Like respect to Bills Mafia because those games are snowy, cold as shit, and just they look miserable to actually stand through, even if your team is winning. So it just shows how big of psychos those Bills fans are, which they're one of the most notorious and beloved fan groups in the NFL, and then it was kind of the battle of the potential MVPs this year. Um, I personally think Lamar will win the MVP and rightfully so, but wouldn't shock me if they gave it to Josh. But story of this game was turnovers. Like I didn't even think I thought the Bills played well, but I didn't think it was the story of the Bills beating the Ravens. It was the Ravens beating the Ravens. We had that just bad fumble by Mark Andrews, and then we had the bad fumble by Lamar, and then the pick. Like it just felt like Baltimore couldn't get out of its own way, even though they were the better team. Like when they weren't turning that ball over, it didn't feel like the Bills had a lot of answers for them offensively. Defensively, obviously, the Ravens struggled at time to stop Josh Allen, which most teams tend to struggle against him. But I did think that the Ravens felt like the better team, and despite having all those turnovers, they still somehow got to where they had the opportunity to go to overtime, and they should have gone. Like, there's no way to say other way to say it. Like, they should have been an overtime game because Mark Andrews dropped a wide open ball at him in the chest, essentially, or at least the hands, and I don't pity Mark Andrews. Like, that man is gonna be crucified for that drop and that fumble. Like I'm sure he's getting piled on, and as a fan of this, like my team, like you can't even be upset with those fans. Like fans put so much into that, like into following their team. Like obviously they're not putting physical stuff in most of the time unless they're going to the game, but you put so much time and motion behind your team and supporting it and identifying with it that's devastating. Like I was watching right next to a diehard Ravens fan, and you could just see the life leave his body basically after that drop because he thought he caught it, so he celebrated, and then they realized, and just you see the drop. Um, and the story coming out of this, I'm sure, is going to be about Lamar Jackson because it's always about the quarterback and how he's basically the James Harden of the NBA or version in the NFL. And I don't think that's a fair comparison for this game. Like, obviously, he had those two bad uh, turnovers, but he put his team in the position to at least go to overtime and win. That I don't think it was the story of Lamar letting his team down. I felt like it was more his team letting him down, which has kind of been a staple from this season in terms of originally it was Justin Tucker, and then this game it was Mark Andrews, and then his receivers would drop a lot of balls throughout the season. That I think coming out, everybody's gonna pile on Lamar about how he's not a winner. He's a regular season quarterback kind of thing, and I don't think that's a fair statement. That I thought coming out of this game, you got to tip your hat to the Bills defense for making these turnovers happen, and then their offense capitalizing. I don't think it's a Lamar uh, sucks and is a not a playoff winner. Like you can't win a Super Bowl with the guy. I thought he looked a little nervous at the beginning, um, but they were in that game. I don't really know where the Ravens are going to go to fix this problem. I think they're going to have to bring in kicker options at the end. This wasn't why they lost the game, but long term, I think that's something they're going to have to think about. Outside of that, I mean, you probably have to look at defensive side of the ball just because through a lot of the year they struggled, but obviously at the end they kind of wrapped it all together. So I don't think there's one glaring issue unless somebody retires, like a Derrick Henry or somebody like that. But maybe bring in a couple more receivers for Lamar. But there's not really big holes in this team because they theoretically should be right back in that mix next year again. And then we'll kind of jump into the games for next week and what I think is going to happen. Which we'll start with the Bills and the Chiefs since we're talking about the Bills. Bills going over to Arrowhead, and this has kind of been apart from Lamar, it's been these two chomping at Mahomes's, you know, heels for the last couple of years, and I don't see the Bills winning this one, to be honest. I think they, I could see them matching up pretty well. I don't think weather is going to play a big factor since they're both just frigid, miserable places in the winter to live. With all respect to those cities, but in the winter that weather sucks. So I don't think the cold is going to be as big a part because they both are used to that climate. And in fact, it might help that Buffalo's coming in because they're used to playing in all that snow, which is arguably harder to play in. Um, but I don't see. Unfortunately, I don't see a team in the AFC that can is going to beat the Chiefs this year. I don't. I think they're playing well enough, and then like. I'm just gonna sound like a bitter Betty, and a hater with this, but I like you just know who's gonna get the calls. Like you literally had the Texans players and coaches talking about it post game, where there's like it's us versus everyone, and I mean everyone on the field. That the Bills are gonna have to be perfect to beat the Chiefs next week, or the Chiefs are gonna have to fuck up. Is kind of the only routes I see for victory for the Bills. So I'd be taking the Chiefs. I think they're gonna squeak out another. I would think they win by about a touchdown, maybe a little more. Um, I'm sure it'll be an entertaining game, but I would bet on the Chiefs in that one. And then for the Eagles and the Commanders, this I think this is a fun game because I believe they're actually division rivals. Obviously you have like the most talented roster, like historic franchise in the Eagles, and then you have like the young feisty Commanders with their rookie quarterback. Who I saw today that most of people are betting on the Commanders to win the Super Bowl, which is wild that you're putting a rookie in at quarterback, and everybody is like these guys are going to win. Like no question. We're putting our money in the table. I'm sure they got good odds, which is definitely part of it, but that's wild to be in a time where a rookie quarterback is like everybody is consensus like or not everybody, but a large majority of the population is like they got a legit shot because of this rookie. That's wild, and I hope to see it. I'm at I'm a bitter Broncos fan, so I'm at the point where I'm cheering against the Chiefs. I'd love to see either the Bills, Eagles, or Commanders win this. If the Chiefs win, it's going to be a bummer, but we'll have to go on with life. We'll have to listen about how Patrick Mahomes is past Brady as the greatest of all time and all that jazz. But we'll cross that bridge if we get to it. Um, but I would, if I'm honest, I'm taking the Eagles in this game. I don't see the Commanders stopping Saquon either, and I think Jalen Hurts. I think it'll be a Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley power running clinic basically, and then their defensive line is so good for the Eagles that I think they're going to cause problems for the Commanders. So I think we're if you made me bet right now, I'm betting on a Chiefs versus Eagles rematch of the Super Bowl from I think it was 2 years ago now, maybe last year. I would have to double check that, but I think we're getting a Chiefs Eagles rematch, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't want the Eagles to win that. I want to see Saquon, who was just a good sport and just a good person, get through that Super Bowl hump after just basically donating his career to the Giants in New York, which is just a like they were never competitive when he was there, and he was clearly the best player. Like I would love to see that happen. Uh, and then if Bills can somehow upset the Chiefs, I'd love to see you know that happened too. Like Bill's Mafia starved. I went to the school, to the University of Wyoming, so I'm sure it would be crazy in the state of Wyoming. I'm sure they'll love him even more. But if you made me pick right now, I think it's going to be Chiefs and the Eagles for the Super Bowl this year in New Orleans with Kendrick Lamar calling Drake a pedophile at halftime. That's my bet. And yeah, we'll see what happens, but that's my picks. Thank you for watching. This has been Jack Paisley at the Sports Casual.